I heard the howl of women in my sleep, writing, starving, and hysterical to capture the cosmic connection of creators who hold up half the sky. On the night of a bloody divided sea, crying, my God, why have you forsaken me to be the mythical rib piece of Eve? Who were silenced by the minyan who said they shouldn't speak until the flaming sword of skeletons came flying out of their mouth, and they transformed into the burning chimera and the shining phoenix, who fornicated and adulterated and left the flock of the false shepherds of suppressed sexuality, fell out on their backs in a gospel of yes and found God, who went skinny dipping in the Mediterranean Sea, naked and starry-eyed, hallucinating they had walked on water with Neptune and Aphrodite, who howled at the moon on sand dune hilltops of Matsada and called it training for shamans of the desert, who were ripped soul and ass by the endless gaze of gang rape, destroyed by the endless gaze of pity, then shock or disbelief, who got out of their beds after just getting inside to scribble half the night their first poetry slam, hands trembling and hearts pounding, who dreamt lines of poems before dawn after staying up past midnight with maracas and kalimbas and rain sticks to put blonde and Jufro children to bed, who ran away from men with 10-day-old babies and lived in women's shelters and did nails and massaged the hairy backs of burly Jewish men who said, no Arabs, please. Who quit jobs working with the mentally ill to sew and felt and lace only to clean houses, to support 3 kids and a grandmother while taking graphic design on the side, who in the madness of disassociation lit fire to poetry and poetry books and watched the flames lap the sky and woke from the nightmare covered in blood, who married men to have a home and cook and watch the children and get big cars and a big house and property in Pisgat-Ze'ev only to leave for better sex, who got engaged and got sick with migraines and had CAT scans and MRIs and blood pressured only to call it off and the symptoms subside, who had to forgive the mothers that found their molester and shipped daughters away for 7 years, then married the perpetrator, who were taught to be virgins till marriage, didn't know how to use the condom, and in the worst 2 seconds of their lives, found out you can get pregnant the first time, who were pushed into walls by husbands, pushed into beds by husbands, held in corners, and forced to listen to dogmatic rantings of menstruation and maturity, who sat in a corner holding themselves, crying because they were afraid they'd put their hands on their children's necks again, who pushed the pieces of fetus into public school toilets and peered into the nothing, wondering later if it had really happened or not, who fell in love with women before it was sexy and wrote poems and held themselves shaking for years on end in the solitude of unrequited love, who orgasmed in kaleidoscopes of interracial teenage experimentation after breaking out of the window with faces stuffed in pillows so the parents wouldn't hear, who walked for hours from Tayela to Emigrafaim to Jaffa to the Russian compound to go upstairs and kiss above the jazz after knowing each other for only 3 days, who went to Marakia soup bars with Quebecois and Palestinians to get one of everything in the joint in shot glasses, discussing the possibilities of a queer muse and what languages she speaks, insisting she must live in a different time zone, who heard the cars passing through the nights of their heads, begging for rest but seeing only blinding headlights, who fell in love with the preacher's son, who was a Jehovah's Witness turned Rastafarian turned Hebrew turned vagabond homeless when his wife left him for a white man, who secretly swallowed diet pills and hated stretch marks and sucked it in for the camera and side-eyed skinny girls, hoping it's really better to have something to hold on to, who watched the stretch marks stretch and the belly turn inside out and believed this was surely a chastity belt against lust, who married and divorced and likes drinking and dancing in Putin because it's a happy place and will not move to Canada, who were groped by religious cousins in corners, later held the babies of their married molesters, wondering if they had told, would this soul be staring back at them? Who answered phones and answered penises, and yes, even answered vaginas, and found themselves bound in happiness. Who slept with ink pens and notebooks, bound in red and Whitman, hoping to catch visions of poetry in their dreams. Who cried for the lost ash poems in the shadows of Hades, of moshas, of teepees, of witch doctor midwives who brought life and slit wrists. Who humped in confessional boxes in churches in Europe and felt each other up in citadels in Yichiyam. Who covered their eyes in tears with the unemployment office psychologists for the loss of faith and dreams deferred. Who dreamt of nights in Paris and film schools in the Big Apple, but delayed because there is nowhere to sleep in New York City. Who wrote poems to daddies in wheelchairs and walking sticks and hung up the phone in tears for the bricks of 1977 reincarnated into brand new high-rises. Who tasted soft lips in an abandoned car in Ashkelon, in the ruins of Akko, in the fields of Bladensburg, and haven't been right since. Who said no, but he did it anyway. Who said no, but he did it anyway. Who watched the Fata Morgana of their husband's hand in disbelief transform into black eyes while the seed had taken root in their womb. Who mourned the failure of Pharaoh, Amazon woman, daughter of Artemis, when they were opened by the imperial cut for a child who refused time. Who wanted to pimp, slap, jack up, beat down, and take out the next person who asked, are you pregnant? Because she couldn't be skinny enough, be skinny enough, be skinny enough. Who sat up for white nights, typing madly and shaking and scratching their necks like junkies because they had something to say. Who were beaten by grandmother maids with the switches of the peach tree because in this day and age she was still afraid of what the white man would do for pulling up Katie Weaver's dress on the hill of the playground. Who loved Jerusalem because she's a whore and they're whores in certain circles, depending on who you talk to. Who didn't go to the funeral of the woman who raised them, who didn't go to the wedding of the friend who lit candles and jumped over a broomstick in memory of her people. Who were dragged through the endless paper trail hydra head of Batuch Lumi and Miswara Panim, fighting tooth and nail for a little blue book and a few shekels to close the month, only to be missing one incomprehensible document. Who vibrated, sobbing and radiant in surreal ecstasy of machinery, come in visions of lost bliss, and saw Jesus, Muhammad, and Diana in one night. Who followed a man to Israel, who followed a man to Israel, who followed a man to Israel. Who climbed to the 13th floor of the matrix to drink from the fountain, holding mementos of a past life, only to discover they were nobody and an entire world. The howl does not come to those women from 9 to 5. It comes at midnight, 1:45 to 2 in the morning, and 1/2 live. It is an all-nighter due the next day. It is a morning sickness in the afternoon. It is alcohol before 12. It is Jerusalem stone with bullet holes. It is a bad hair day for an interview with the gatekeepers to God. And it is beautiful, wild, and fierce, like blood, orgasms, and birth, all out of breath and in that order.